Greetings, rabble rousers. My name is Jessa McLean. Welcome to Blueprints for Disruption, a weekly discussion dedicated to amplifying activism across Turtle Island. Together, we will examine tactics, explore motivations, and celebrate successes in disrupting the status quo. This podcast is a proud part of New Left Media. This week, I'd like to thank Kim Crawley, our newest patron. Your support is such a boost for us here at Blueprints, and it truly reminds us that we're reaching people and folks are appreciating the content. So thank you very much, Kim. This show often focuses on organizers and activists, and although my next guest, Duncan Pike, fits that bill, this episode also provides a glimpse into the Institute for Change Leaders, an organization with the explicit goal of empowering and equipping new leaders and getting folks ready to mobilize more and more towards change. In the interview, Duncan challenges the definition of leadership, and while sharing his own journey into activism, we also get some basic tools in how to make a plan for change and how to share that theory of change with other people. I learned a lot from Duncan, and I was lucky enough to take one of the courses at ICL. So take a listen, and I encourage you to check out the Institute for Change Leaders a little bit more when you're done listening to the show. Good afternoon. Welcome, Duncan. Thank you for joining me.
Thanks so much for having me, Jessica.
Let's take a moment and introduce yourself to our listeners. You know, who you are, what you're doing at the moment. Tell us a bit about yourself, Duncan.
So I am communications manager and also a trainer and facilitator with the Institute for Change Leaders. And we are an organization, we're based in Toronto, operate across the country, and we offer community organizing training, and we partner with groups across the country, nonprofits, unions, labor movement, social movement groups. I've been there for about 3 or 4 years now.
You teach people how to be organizers.
Mm-hmm.
How did you become an organizer?
It's a great question. So I first became involved with this curriculum and with this methodology of community organizing when I was a communications and campaigns coordinator with a group called Canadian Journalists for Free Expression. And we were organizing a campaign around getting this a new law passed to protect journalists whose sources were being demanded by judges and by police, and who were being spied on. And there was this really famous, outrageous incident in 5 or 6 years ago, where Quebec police had been spying on like 12 journalists in Quebec, had actually been following around their movements, had bugged their phones to try and find out who was a anonymous source within the police movement who was kind of they were reporting on corruption within Quebec police. And there's this huge scandal, and part of the scandal was that this was all perfectly legal. Like everything that they were doing was totally allowed, and that they were like the judges had warrants, and like the justices of the peace had signed off on this. And this had really shocked a lot of people in Canada. And my job was like, what are we going to do about it? And so we, as part of this campaign, there was a senator had introduced a bill, a private member's bill, to say basically make it a lot harder for police to be able to get these kind of warrants, and to protect journalists from having to reveal their sources in the context of a courtroom. But it was a private member's bill. These almost never ever get passed in the government. And it was a conservative senator, so it was an opposition senator introducing it as well. He just happened to be one who had taken on this issue. And so I didn't have a background as much in organizing at the time or advocacy. I was kind of more on like the policy side. And so I took this course at X University. It was taught by Olivia Chow. And it's this method for this methodology and this approach for bringing people together, for actually taking a challenge that people are facing in the world and actually making a change and forcing people in power to do what you want, to win a change, a concrete change in the world. And this was a really clear campaign we could kind of use this methodology on and practice it. And so I took this course. I was immediately really wowed by it. It was really transformational for me, and I loved the approach. And we kind of implemented it right away at CJFE alongside the whole team there, and brought people together. We organized like a day of action. We organized social media campaigns. We had people from around the world, journalist unions from around the world, and press freedom groups from around the world, joining our campaign, putting pressure on the Trudeau government to support this private members bill to increase protections for journalist sources. And we ended up, like our campaign other groups who were pushing for this, got the Canadian government and got the Trudeau government to agree to get past this bill. And then a couple months later, like within a year, they had passed the bill, and it was law of the land. So, and it was really exciting to be a part of this process where we had moved from really kind of unlikely change happening. Like I said, private members bills almost never pass, to this being a real concrete change and increase in protections for journalists in Canada. And I was really hooked. I really loved this approach. Like I said, I didn't have much of a background or much of a history in political or community organizing before that. But I stayed connected with it. I loved the work. I started volunteering with the Institute for Change Leaders. This was like 4 years ago or so. And I just gradually started doing more. And I wanted to dive more deeply into the methodology and the approach, and started helping, like volunteering to coach and to mentor people, and gradually did more and more. And now I'm working there full time, and I'm a teacher and facilitator for a lot of different kinds of groups.
That's amazing. So thanks for sharing, like, how you got there. I hear you say, you didn't know how to get there, but you knew you had to do something, right? What are we going to do? Not everybody asks themselves that, that, right? Like some people are frustrated by what's going on or see wrongs, in what they do. I'm curious if you know where your drive to actually take that next step, to go seek the tools needed to make that campaign a success. Some would have just shrugged their shoulders, issued an article, done maybe the bare minimum. What pushes you to make massive changes like that?
It's a really good question. And like one of the things we teach is the power of storytelling and the power of like your own personal experience in moving people. And so I've reflected a lot on that. And some people have like a really clear, like, when I was 6, they tried to bulldoze my park. And so I stood up, and, that's when everything changed for me. And I think it goes back to how I was raised. And I think about my dad from when I was very young, talking about like the importance of labor unions and little guys sticking up for themselves. And like, the angriest I've ever seen him was when like the conservative government in BC like fired 1/3 of public sector workers in like one go, and all unionized workers tore up contracts. Just furious. This really gentle guy, and just really stuck with me. And like the basic feeling of that, like we're all in this together, and that we have to look out for each other, and that like no one is really better than anyone else in the end. Fundamentally, but then in practice, obviously, that's not how it works, and because of power imbalances, because there's so much injustice in society in so many different ways, and so I think it goes back to that a little bit, and I think I came to this relatively late because I wasn't introduced to these kind of approaches for making a change. And I think a lot of it, I came to it from like almost like a technocratic way, like the way to make a change is better policy or more research, and there are these can be really important ways of doing it. And I think this is one of the reasons I really like the fact that we work with a lot of younger folks, a lot of youth, a lot of teenagers as well, is because I think being introduced to these kind of ways of thinking about change in the world at a young age is really important, because I don't think people are in high school or even a lot of time in university, let alone elementary school, taught like that these are actually ways you can make a difference in the world, and that ordinary people can come together and build power and make change. And it doesn't have to be about like working through established avenues for doing that. Like people say, like, oh, you know what? If you care so much, go out and vote really hard. But there's so many other ways. And voting can be really important, of course, but like there's so many other ways that people can come together and build power, and incredibly powerful stories from throughout history and the history of our country as well, for when that happens and how that happens. And the more I'm engaged in this work, the more I see it happen, like on like an individual level, people realizing that they have this power, and people in their community who face the same challenge can come together and make a difference, sometimes on a really small scale, and sometimes like transforming on the national scale, like winning winning universal childcare. Like these kind of things can happen. And once you start seeing that happen, it gets really addictive, and it's kind of like a positive, it's a virtuous cycle. People, you want to continue, you continue seeing people, the eyes light up and realize that they have this fire within them to want to do this, and they have stories that move them and experiences that move them to want to be leaders, and that they're called to leadership, and that they can learn the tools to actually put this in practice. And it's a really exciting thing.
I too had a father who, railed against injustice and was a union steward, and yeah, he was a waffle member as well, right? But I just I can see that as a child, where you start to understand that things that don't happen to you are just as bad, where it's an injustice anywhere kind of deal. So I
Yeah.
appreciate that. Um, Thanks for sharing kind of your origin story. We did get it out of you.
And yes, it took a while.
Right.
There was a moment I remember too, like we were like leaving dinner downtown, and like it was like December or something like that, and we had this old like '77 green Volkswagen van which we loved. Parents were hippies, you could probably tell, and like there was this man sleeping on the street, and it was really cold, and my parents just gathered all the blankets up and just like left it out and gave it to him, and I was like 6 or 7 years old, and it was just like, well, little moments like that stick with me. I mean, it's a privileged moment, of course. Like we were the ones giving the blanket in that way, and we weren't transforming the system, but it's just like that, just like small gesture that like of care and outreach and support. Yeah, sticks with me.
The two, like, I think collective responsibility. It's not just you and your home that you're responsible for, right? It's
Yeah,
kind of, we have responsibilities greater than ourselves.
absolutely, absolutely.
Let's talk nuts and bolts. So the Institute for Change Leaders, though, I see on the website that a lot of success stories working with PSWs to secure better long-term care, Black Youth Leadership Program, working with the African Center for Refugees. But how do you guys help, right? How do you folks do? What are you going in there and doing? Is it just lessons? Is it pure academics?
No, it's definitely not pure academics. Like we're a training and capacity building organization first and foremost, and so we partner with groups like the ones you mentioned, like folks in long term care. So I can use an example right now. I'm leading a course. Gets folks from all across the country and from a lot of different backgrounds and communities, but there's a big contingent of folks who work in long term care or PSWs. And basically, and this is kind of one of the most common approaches we take, and our kind of template course, where it's like an 8-part series, and we start with offering an introduction to some basic organizing practices, like trying to clarify like who are the people you're working with, who is your community, and what is the main challenge they face, like what's the goal you're trying to accomplish, what's some ideas you have about how you're going to accomplish it, and like what's your timeline you're working with. And what this does, and then there's kind of like one half of this is a little bit of lecture component, like here's some of the core ideas to set the stage, and we want to introduce people to. And then the second half of everything we do, it's equal time for like a small group session where we actually put these ideas into practice. So there's brainstorming, there's coaching, there's mentoring, where we work through all this together to try and clarify like what is the goal you're actually trying to accomplish, like what's the thing that would actually make a concrete difference in the life of the people in your community, and we build on that with training in public narrative, it's called. And this is a combination of like a story of your personal narrative, kind of a little bit what I said at the start, like what is it that calls you as an individual to leadership, like what's a key moment in your life where you stood up and decided you wanted to make a change, you wanted to make a difference, and what does this reveal about who you are and what your values are, and then story of us, which is like what is the challenge that your community faces, like what binds you as an individual to those who you want to organize, who you're organizing with, what's the shared challenge you face, and what's the values that unite you as a community. And that could be anything for like PSWs, like they all know what binds them. They face terrible working conditions, underpay, understaffed, and they're bound by values as well. And this could include people who aren't necessarily directly part of that, like who aren't also PSWs, but people who care about looking after people who live in long-term care, folks from the disability community, for seniors, folks who need this, to say like no one should be overworked, no one should be forgotten and treated this poorly. And then story of like why is it important that we take action now? Like what is the urgency of this challenge? Like what is it that's gonna, okay, we share the same challenge, but like what is it that's actually gonna get me off the couch at the end of the day when I've been working hard to want to actually take action, right? To want to talk to my fellow coworkers, to get them to come together, that's gonna want to get us to write letters to the editor, that's gonna get us to picket outside the minister for long-term care. And once you've established this, that's how you build a really strong relationship and a sense of shared identity and a shared sense of shared purpose. That's going to actually provide the moral and the social basis for actually taking collective action together. And then we kind of move on from that to some of the kind of nuts and bolts of, okay, you've identified what your goal is, who your people are, and how you're going to come together. But how do you come up with a strategy that's actually going to get you what you want? And a theory of change for why the actions you're taking are actually going to lead to the outcome that you want, and who actually has power in this situation, right? Because a lot of times it's not necessarily super clear. Sometimes it's clear, but you misidentify or you misunderstand like what is it that's actually driving them, right? A lot of times we come together. The first thing people think is, okay, we like raise awareness, right? That's always the first thing people think. If more people know about this issue and all the trouble we're having and all the problems we face, then something will happen. And the classic one of that is climate change, right? It's like, if more people know about how bad climate change is, we're going to solve it, right?
My
Well,
4-year-old knows. That's not the
yeah,
problem.
right. So like, and the climate change, the oil executives know, right? Like everyone knows. You can't possibly say people don't know about the risks of climate change, but that's not enough, right? And so thinking like, what is actually, can we do based on the resources we have to actually make a change and to force those people, given what their interests are, to doing what needs to be done, so we can win the change we need to see in the world. And then move on from that. And then all of this is like we work through the kind of main concepts of this, and then always go into like kind of a small group session, and we collaborate and we say like, hey, let's work through this together. And we have worksheets, we have like structures for like thinking through like each one of these, like fill this out, work on this together. And so then you have a developed theory of change, you have a developed strategy that you can test, that you can share, co-develop with the people you're working with. And then like, how do we put this into practice? Like, what are tactics we can develop that would effectively implement this theory of change in the world, and actually move the decision maker, move the person in power, and build up the capacity of our organization and develop the leadership of the people who are part of our community, so that if this doesn't work right away, we need to change our strategy, we're still in a better place. Like, people have had some experience, people have grown as leaders, we have more people joined, our organization has more power and more capacity, and then ideally that leads to victory, right? You've won some kind of change in the world, and you can move on to the next thing. And usually we try and focus people on like what's in, let's say, the next 6 months, like what's an immediately achievable goal. And and there's the mountaintop goal, like we want to transform, we want to end capitalism in Canada, or we want to nationalize the oil industry, whatever it is, or like we or even like yeah, or that's depending on what group we're working with, or we want like a national long-term care, universal long-term care, public long-term care. So like, okay, that's a mountaintop goal you work to over many years with a huge number of people, but like within your own community, okay, maybe it's just this one long-term care center. We want to make sure that we maintain like specific hours in this case, or there's a certain policy that the management has put in that we want to overturn, and that's something you can win with your own colleagues. And then once, like, just the people in your building, and once you've won that, you're in a better place to actually win. You're more powerful. You have the capacity. You have the skills. You're in a better place to win the next thing along the line. So.
My favorite part about what you folks do is that you spend your energy on what I think is like our most valuable resource, and it's people.
Yeah.
Because like any activist will tell you, or anybody who's kind of politically aware, I feel like one of our biggest frustrations is like, why don't more people get as mad as me? Or why won't more people come out and do what needs to get done? before we started recording, talking about why, disrupting the infrastructure, right? Like that book by Andreas Mob, I think, right?
Mom, yeah.
Mom, thank you. Where, why aren't more people actually taking the action needed to bring about the change they are already aware we need, right? And so you guys, or you folks, teach people how to create more involved people, right? Because without political will only come from the masses, right? I think we all understand that the politicians only act when enough of us demand something, but it's just getting enough people to demand that thing that seems to be tricky. So you folks at ICL seem to have a theory on exactly how one can take an issue and mobilize people around it. I mean, that's an invaluable skill for me. I would wish we could disseminate this information to absolutely everybody. Perhaps a high school course in organizing. But we know the establishment will not give us the tools we need to overthrow it, right? We will need institutions like ICL and whatnot to provide these tools. You mentioned, we don't learn about how to organize our power or direct our power in high school and whatnot. That's by design. So I'm happy to see that folks are out there kind of disrupting that and teaching the youth, because all that awareness has paid off, right? Our youth are completely aware that job is done. They just need the tools to take it forward. So
Yeah. Yeah, and I think you mentioned one of the things we do, like we do work with a couple youth programs, like you said, the Black Youth Leadership Program, and a good example of that. And we teach these skills. It's a bit of a modified curriculum, but one of the stories we're really proud of, or examples, is two young men named Lookman and Hickman, whose principal brought in this policy that do-rags were, the gang-affiliated dress, and prohibiting them from being used in the school or being worn in the school. And they're graduates of this Black Youth Leadership Program that we do in partnership with a group called For Youth Initiative. And so they actually ran a campaign based on a lot of these principles that stress like this is culturally relevant dress. Like this is part of our culture. And racist to call it gang affiliated, and denied on that basis. And they brought their classmates together. They posted around the school and called in other teachers and parents and folks. I think in the school trustees, and got the principal to reverse this and affirm this as culturally relevant dress, which just at an immediately small scale, they were able to use these skills, use these principles to push back against injustice in a way that was really inspiring and really cool.
That's a great success story. I read about it online and watched the video. So to see youth kind of get successes like that, I'm sure they've now had that taste, and there's no stopping, those two. And it's like that snowball effect, right? Duncan, I'm sure you've planted so many seeds you've actually seen sowed, but you don't see what those seedlings that come from those, right? Like you can just imagine how exponential your work doing that kind of stuff can be, right?
Yeah, one of my favorite things to do is one of the people that we teach, and especially ones in the classes that I teach, setting up calls 6 months out and a year out, for check-ins, one-on-one conversations, being where's your organizing at? What's going on? What challenges are you facing? How are you doing? And seeing that continue on. I think one of the challenges we have is we're limited by capacity. We're still a relatively small organization, but would love to do more of that, right? Having long-term partnerships and help to grow, like you said, this movement of people who have started these skills and have continued this work, and think about this like an ecosystem that we can continue to support people and bring more people in, is kind of one of the next steps, hopefully, as we continue to grow and do this work.
So if folks like Lookman and Hickman are going to be our future leaders, and change kind of lies within new leadership, what element is missing from our current leadership? What is different about the leaders emerging from ICL that will allow us to actually get the change that we need? Because we have leaders, right? There's lots of leaders, Duncan. The legislature is apparently full of them. We have office towers apparently filled with them. but nothing is happening. So do we need, what's in these leaders that's going to make the difference?
It's a really great question. And we don't need to get into semantics, but I guess it goes back to how you define leader, right? And what exactly that means. And one of the things I really love about this approach, was, and the curriculum that we teach was developed by a guy named Marshall Gantz, who was involved in the civil rights movement and one of the leaders with Cesar Chavez of the California grape boycott of the 1960s and 70s with the United Farm Workers. And he took a lot of what he had learned from all this time in the labor movement, in the civil rights movement, and kind of codified the best practices, things like what allows people to come together to make a change, like folks, like you said, who don't have money, but they have people, and how do they build power to win the change they need in the world. And the way he defines leadership is enabling others to accept positions, to accept responsibility under conditions of uncertainty, and that leadership is a practice. It's not a position that you occupy in like a structure of authority or in a hierarchy. It's not something, leadership isn't something you get by virtue of like who you are or what your job title is. It's something you practice, and it's something that anyone can practice within, no matter where they are or no matter who they are. And anyone can learn these skills. And it's, like I said, it's about bringing people together and enabling them to accept responsibility to make a change under conditions of uncertainty. So when you don't know if what you're going to do is going to work, when you don't know what the reaction is going to be, if there's going to be a backlash, you can't make any promises based on, because the power that you're challenging is always going to push back in ways that you can't always predict. But it's enabling people to access the moral resources, the spiritual resources, and the sense of solidarity and community and urgency to say that we have to make this change. And we're in this together. We have to take action together. And here's how we can make a change. Let's develop this together. Let's figure this out together. What are we going to do? Who's going to do what? And then let's do it. And in terms like leadership can be someone who's a CEO. He went to the right schools, is the right color and gender, the right in terms of like within that hierarchy.
Duncan's using air quotes for those who can't.
Right, we're doing audio.
Full disclosure.
You can't see that. But isn't practicing that kind of leadership, right? Isn't there to build up the leadership and from those who are below them in the hierarchy. So we need more of those kind of leaders, right? The leaders who are developing the leadership of others and enabling others. And that's kind of baked into how we do the work that we do, right? We're always trying to develop new leaders. We always bring people in and are constantly training new trainers so that they can take their curriculum that we've taught and then bring that to their own community and teach the people there. And so that's something we're really proud of, that we're always teaching new teachers. Folks come on as facilitators, and that's exactly how I got involved. I took the class, and then I volunteered as a co-facilitator, and then I started being and facilitating, and we pay all our facilitators. This is people are laboring, doing the labor, and trying to get paid. Need to get paid to do it, and constantly developing new teachers and new facilitators so that you can go on to your community and share these lessons, and then you develop the leadership of the people in your community as well. And so we're constantly doing that. And I think one of the ways, like the biggest initiatives and the biggest partnerships we've had over the past few years is with early childhood educators and childcare workers in Ontario. And our founder, Olivia Chow, obviously, this has been something she's worked on her whole career, and worked with Association of Early Childhood Educators of Ontario and Ontario Coalition for Better Childcare, and had directly trained hundreds and hundreds of childcare workers in Ontario on these principles about how do you turn your community into a constituency that can take action together, how to turn a group of childcare workers into a political force that can actually demand changes and win changes from those in power. And now they run their own trainings, right? There's tons of they have a team of instructors who know how to teach this themselves, and facilitators, and they run it themselves, right? They teach childcare workers all over the province as well, and have had enormous success. And I think can see that in a lot of the victories that the childcare movement has had over the past couple of years.
You dropped a big name in Canadian electoral politics there. Is it, we didn't mention that at the beginning, but the founder of ICL is Olivia Chow.
Yeah.
So I think when most people understand that she's attached to this, they would think political leaders. This is all about politics. But when we hear about your work, you've not mentioned any kind of electoral politics. Pressure, yes, to make legislative change, but so you're not out there to build the next prime minister, or are you? Does that fit? Do politicians fit that definition of leadership? Like, does their position allow for that?
Yeah, absolutely. I don't see why not. I mean, you could certainly have criticisms of electoral politics and how it's structured, but we're a totally nonpartisan organization. We're a charity. Have to be by law as well, but we do work, like, folks have taken the course who are running for office, and I think a lot of these skills and a lot of these principles are absolutely applicable to running for elected office. And there's no reason why you can't run a campaign or a political movement for elected office based on these principles. I think some of the way our systems are designed probably are biased towards like that, the kind of singular figure who's a position of total authority, and not so much on like interdependence in that way, or collective leadership. But the principles themselves, I think, absolutely can be implemented. And I think a lot of the folks who have taken this course, taken this training, and who are deeply engaged in this material are folks who have who are involved in electoral politics as well. And this is, I think, you raised some really good points. Like, I think some of this, like Marshall Gantz also was one of the organizing directors for the 2008 Barack Obama campaign as well. And so a lot of the principles for that really drove Obama's victory in that campaign, and that victory over Hillary Clinton in the primary in 2008 were based on a lot of these principles, like how to develop grassroots leadership and independent teams that can kind of operate without like top-down authority, that they take authority for themselves. We call it's called the snowflake model, where you have kind of interdependent, non-hierarchical teams that can recruit new people and link up with other folks who are also on the team, but don't require that kind of top-down structure, which was the source of a lot of Obama's success in that campaign. And actually, if you watch some of his speeches, you can really see some of the principles of like that, the public narrative that like, here's who I am, here's what calls me to leadership, here's how we're linked together, and the shared challenges that we face, and here's why it's so urgent that we take action now. That structure, it's funny, once you start learning about it, you see it just all the time in really successful, really powerful speeches. And Obama's really famous 2004 Democratic Convention speech that launched his career, you can see these principles, this kind of storytelling techniques come through really clearly. Marshall Gantz has a lot of criticisms of how Obama's presidency turned out, and that's another question. But but these are really powerful tools, I think, and can be used in a lot of different ways.
So these tools that when you use a methodology, especially if it's dated, right? How does it evolve? How does ICL take what it learns? I mean, how many activists do you think you've trained, Duncan?
We have actually, we track every single, the numbers in every training we do. And I was actually just recently calculating this and running through the spreadsheets that we maintain. And we just actually, the past month, crossed the threshold of 10,000 people we have trained in Canada, which was incredible to see. And that's since we were founded in 2015. So yeah, that was a huge milestone for us, and really exciting. In terms of how we continue to develop and not stagnate, I think it's a really good question. And we're constantly kind of reworking the curriculum and the slides based on the feedback. Every session, evaluation and feedback and evolution of what we're doing is baked into every training we do. We always have like feedback sessions, like what worked for folks today, what didn't, how can we change, how can we improve. Literally every single session we do, we always do that. And the teaching team always gets together to say like what was working, what didn't work, how can we improve this. in like a month, we're getting together actually like two solid days booked just to totally rework our curriculum based on kind of what we've been learning. And it's based just in the experience of working directly with folks from across the country, working in all sorts of different industries and backgrounds and causes. Like, here's what worked for people. Here's like where people's actual experience of the training and actually implementing it in their work. Like what was really valuable for them, like what made them feel like they were really excited, what worked for them when they implemented it in their campaign, and then changing that around. So the curriculum we kind of inherited originally back in 2015 from work from Marshall Gantz, from his course, from Organize BC, which is a group in British Columbia that was doing a lot of similar trainings like this, and other folks, and have kind of updated that and continue to evolve.
That's amazing to think that 10,000 people have kind of gone through the doors, so to speak.
Yeah.
And I always think of this, and I mentioned earlier that those 10,000 people have shared that knowledge by now, right? And we cannot measure the impact, but that is quite a substantial number. I do want to say that I can speak from experience. I was lucky enough to take a 3 session course there alongside my comrade Jay and yourself. You facilitated that, and you really did. Each session took the feedback from the last, and it was immediately incorporated into the next one. And that was really important because it was a group that was specifically focused on accessibility needs, right? And I was very impressed with that, how fluid you were able to adjust, and willing. Right? Not everyone asks for feedback, but not everybody actually wants it. I've learned that, particularly in some workplaces. So it's that I found very refreshing and promising, because then you knew that it would just constantly be this evolving, progressive methodology rather than something kind of stuck in time. I do want to also say that one of the things that I got most from that training, or I found the hardest, was doing that personal narrative, that story of self. I know what is wrong, and sometimes I think I know how to fix it, right? Or at least I tell myself I do. Levers of power, my political science brain is like, I can do this. I know. But then it's like, what drives you? What will connect you to other people? And I've never stopped to think about that. And you're like, well, why? That seems like all in the head kind of fluffy stuff. You don't need to, like, just get to work. And it really did impact how I then approached my future interactions, right? You really do need to think of that inner perspective. What drives you? What drives them? What is in common? And, all the organizing I'd ever done, I'd never asked myself those questions. So I think I maybe got like 6 hours of ICL's training or whatnot. I don't know, but I learned so much. So I can only imagine what folks are getting out of the more substantial courses or the real kind of immersion settings that you do with the unions or specific campaigns. How do you guys keep going? Like, how do you, your nonprofit, who pays for this? Who can pay to learn how to organize rabble rousers? I mean, I can't.
I'll get to. I want to come back to. I want to. Well, thank you for saying all that, and it was really great working with you. And I want to say, I was trying to tell my story a little bit earlier, and I kept stumbling over it. I say I've been doing this for many years now, and had so much practice on telling my story, but I still work on it, and it's still something that's evolving, and trying to think about like what does drive me, and it can change too and constantly evolve. And I think there is a resistance a lot of the time. People go, I'm not important here. Like, it doesn't matter what I think. It's about the larger thing. It's about, don't put me in the center stage. And it's not about like, because, your story is so crucial, or like we want to focus on the individual to the detriment of everything else. But it is really important, because I think I've learned through this is in some ways organizing is kind of a fancy word for relationship building, and you're asking people to be in a relationship with you, not a personal relationship, but like a public relationship, to say we're gonna work together on a thing we care about, to make a change in the world. There's a change we really need to see. and we're going to make commitments to one another and support each other. And like, that is a kind of relationship. And so if you're asking someone to be in a relationship with you, one, like on an individual level, on a community level, on a group of people, they need to know who you are, right? They need to know what drives you, what your values are, why you care about this. Like, what is it that motivates you to do this? And are you actually in this? Do you really care about this? It's just like a thing you're doing, until you find something more interesting. Like, what is it? And there's nothing, and because we are, like, human beings are hardwired for stories, and it's where we find meaning, it's where we get lessons, it's how we get motivation to carry on the fight, even when it seems like just totally lost or we can't see any reason to go on. And so when we hear someone else's story, like, here's something I went through. And so the story I was trying to tell is about, like, being diagnosed with cancer at a very young age. I was 24 years old and just feeling like a totally broken person who couldn't walk forward, didn't know what I was doing, tried all my life to be like a self-reliant person, like, and realizing that wasn't working anymore, and that I needed to connect to a larger community, and was able to link with this amazing community of other young adult cancer survivors who knew what I was going through, who had been, who'd felt the kind of terror and sense of helplessness and loneliness and isolation that I had felt, and I was part of something bigger, and that really transformed me in a lot of ways, and made me like, and I felt like okay being vulnerable with and sharing all these things. And and I'm going kind of off on a tangent now, but like, one of the campaigns I'm working on now, I'm still connected with this community, and we recently joined a group called AOA CAN, it's Adolescents and Young Adult with Cancer advocacy, and we're fighting for more resources, better conditions, and more support for young adults with cancer and young adult cancer survivors, because this is a population that is really forgotten in our healthcare system. There's a lot of focus on folks who are seniors, who get the majority of cancer, and childhood cancer have specialized centers, as they should. But there's a lot of folks in this our age range who fall through the cracks, don't get that kind of support, and who are a lot worse off. And so we're fighting for better care, better resources and support across the country. And I went off on a tangent there, but just wanted to share a little bit. Like, that is something in my experience, realizing like how interdependent I was, how much I relied on other people, let alone the public healthcare system. I was unemployed when I was diagnosed, and I still got really great care. I was really fortunate in that case. A lot of young adults with cancer don't. But there was a whole community there to support me of other folks. And I realized like how much I did rely on other people, and how important that is, that they were there for me. And that afterwards is when I got healthy again, that I could volunteer with this community. I could support other people. I could be there for them. And so that other people who are diagnosed after me don't have to go through that kind of sense of isolation and not having the support that I felt. And those kind of, I talk about like shared values, like maybe I can share that story and say, like, maybe you're not a young adult cancer survivor, maybe you've never had that, but we've all felt like at one point, like, no one understood what we were going through, and that there wasn't someone there to support me at a time when like I really needed help. I think we've all felt that at some point in our life, and like what a difference it would make, and what a difference it makes when you finally find your people, finally find someone who really gets you and understands what you're going through, right? And that's what this is about. That's what this community is about, and that's why we want to support the community of young adult cancer survivors, because no one should have to go through that. And so that's I'm kind of using that as a demonstration as well of like, this is how story can unite people, even when you don't have that experience. You can connect it to this larger sense of shared values that we have. And if I just said the statistics of here's how many adults with cancer are diagnosed every year, right? It's not the same. And it doesn't, but learning how to talk about that is something I learned in this course. I learned how to share my experience, and here's how it connects to this larger challenge that we face, and here's why we need to take action now, was so powerful. And that's something everyone has a story. Everyone has some kind of challenge that they faced in their life, where they've made a choice to do something about it, and it tells you something about who they are. And once you've heard that from someone, you know something about them, you can say like, yeah, let's do this. Let's take action together. And here's something about me, and I want to share something about myself. So, and Jess, I know you did share your story, and in the course, I won't put you on the spot now, but if I'd love to hear if you want to share, like what drives you to do this work?
Yeah, I remember it is a deeply personal connection. I remember I was in tears when I shared it the first time, I think, no problem. But when I had to do it again, it was just the tears came. And I remember you asking me, why are you, what are those tears for? And I couldn't even explain that. It was a real push on me to explore why I do what I do. And sometimes it's just that inner sense of collective responsibility too that I have developed over my lifetime from, you know, influence from my father, from being involved with movements. And yeah, you say at the beginning there that you're building relationships, but not personal relationships. And I kind of going, you got to be kidding. I know what you meant, but those are the most personal relationships I have built because we grow from them, right? Like the folks you organize to change the world with, I think are your close to me are the like your closest connections because
I meant to say they're not private. They're not
I
private
no, I know,
relationships.
but
That's
like
what I should
even
say.
when you said like it just cringed, right?
They're
Like that
very,
word, and
very
I was like,
personal.
they are
Very
the
personal.
most personal, right? We build these huge connections, and yeah, I mean, right now, what I'm doing is to give voice to people. I think there's just so much work that's being done out there that people don't hear about, and um, a lot of people feel like we do, where they just want to make so much change and they know that what's going on around them is just not right and they have no idea where to start or they don't picture themselves as a big player. And I think it would surprise them to see that the folks doing a lot of this work are driven by the same things, are doing work that is completely accessible to them, that have starting points. They didn't all start as teachers or organizers, right? Um, so that's what drives me here. I mean, I'm sure there'll be an episode where I can really sit down and talk about what makes me want to destroy capitalism. But yeah, I'll have to emotionally
I want
prepare
to
for
go
that
into I want
one.
to go into teacher mode right now, and I want to like keep asking questions to really get at that. But we can, we don't have to do that now. That's
No,
fine.
my
Your
producer will have
show.
to edit out the sobs, right? Like it really is personal, right? The work when you organize to these ends, it's I don't know, it's very comes from within. Like it's a drive that if you don't do it, you're not it just doesn't sit right with you. And anyone, who organized alongside me will know if I've stopped coming out and organizing and pushing, I'm probably not well mentally. You probably have to come check on me. So it's a matter of for me, it's just I got to do it. I I'll take time to explore it more, but right now it's just like a
Let's do a
huge.
one-on-one. We can coach. We can do some practicing if you want. I'd
I'm
be
game
happy
for
to.
that, Duncan. I'm
Okay,
sure
let's
I
do it.
need it.
Let's
So
do it. What
let
I want to pick up on. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
no
I
go.
just want to pick on one thing you said. I think in terms of like the sense of like other people who don't think of themselves as activists or like don't know other people care about this. And I think like kind of it's kind of like a corollary of this work that I found really incredible. It's about making concrete change in the world ultimately and taking action, right? But it's so important the sense of community as well that you get from it, and like how much it really addresses a lot of the alienation I think a lot of people feel, and like this is a huge part. Like a lot of people feel like there's so much. It's kind of overwhelming how many challenges, how awful a lot of things are in the world, and the sense like it can be really isolating and really alienating. And like there's nothing I can do about it, and like and people go into like that doomer mindset. There's like the doomer memes, like oh nothing matters, everything's shit, whatever. Um, and this is such a powerful antidote to a lot of that, I think. And the way our society is structured, we don't have that sense of solidarity or that sense of being of connection to our neighbor, to our community. And this kind of work baked into it is that sense of community building and that sense of like that kind of alienation or isolation is absolute poison. It's the opposite of organizing. And organizing is this kind of organizing and relationship building, which is at its heart is such a powerful counter to all that. And that has tremendous, I think, personal benefits too, like the sense of connectedness you feel to other people, and in telling your story, like the sense of vulnerability and people hearing that, and it's not about like personal validation, but there's kind of like a side effect of it in some ways. It's like I can share what the kind of like some of the most important things about who I am and what moves me, and other people make a relationship on that basis, and other people can share their story, and we understand that we have things in common and that we're united, and that if we come together, we can actually face and deal with the challenges we're facing together. The things that most deeply affect and harm our community, and what we're and we can win better conditions. We can win justice for ourselves. And these are things that all, like, just at a personal level, can be really transformative and can turn something, a lot, like people who are jaded and have dismissed the possibility of things getting better into something a lot more motivational. And that's something I constantly feel when I'm doing this work. Just on a personal level, it's very good because I come out so motivated and like jazzed and just like uplifted in a way. It's like I was in just last night I was doing with the class we're running right now, like 30 people with PSWs, and then so we had a group of it was like a kind of coaching session where like people who were taking we just kind of like an open session where we talk about what we're working on, and like what I have challenges with in my organizing, and like, okay, let's ask questions, let's brainstorm together. And there was a group of PSWs working on a campaign. It's PSW Day coming up on May 19th, I think, maybe, or 29th. I'm getting the date wrong, but they're organizing like an action to bring people together to raise visibility and get the word out on PSW Day. Very short time frame, just to kind of like in their community. I think in Ontario, I can't remember exactly where. And then another group, a young woman who's organizing a community of support for trans youth and queer youth, and connecting with trans elders and queer elders for intergenerational kind of support, because a lot of queer youth don't have that kind of support or mentorship. Either like some parents don't accept them, some parents just like don't have that same experience necessarily. And so this young woman went through that, and she's trying to organize folks like a space and a structure where they can come together. And then another person who's organizing like a group of disability justice activists in Alberta. And it's just like, it was a 1 hour and I was kind of jumping from group to group, and people were working and like all working on different campaigns in like different provinces. And they were all kind of like sharing tactics and like support and like ideas and brainstorming. And it was like the most motivating thing you could possibly think. And like everyone came out of it thinking like, hey, we actually have a lot in common here. And like, wow, the folks who are PSWs, like, yeah, like in the woman with disability justice advocate was like, yeah, I love you guys. You're so important for folks in our community, and we support you so much. And it was just like, it was so heartening. And like, I think you like scroll on Twitter and things are just awful all the
Doom
time.
scrolling.
And you doom scroll and it's just like, oh my God, things are terrible. And like, I don't know what's activism is about, like dunking on Elon Musk. And like, that's very satisfying too. But it's just like what's Jordan Peterson saying now? You're just like, oh my God. Like, but then he's like, you can go do this, and like actual people doing work at the grassroots, like connecting with their people in their community, trying to make things better. And it's like the perfect antidote to this sense of just like things are terrible and the world's falling apart, and like Trump's going to be reelected in 2004, and like Roe v. Wade is getting overturned. And like, I don't mean like things are genuinely like are awful, and I'm a very privileged person. And people are facing awful challenges and so much injustice. But like this kind of stuff is people can come together and take action together. And there's ways to do it. And I think what's really powerful to me is it does demystify a lot of it. And it makes it's not just like, it's a set of tangible skills you can learn to actually bring people together and make a change when you don't have anything but your story and your community.
You mentioned all these things and it was like you were doom scrolling for us, but it's true. Like every time those things come up, though, they drive people together as well. Right. So, uh, folks often say it has to get worse before it gets better. Right. So perhaps some of these awful things that we go through then, spur the camaraderie and the solidarity that we need. But
I think I don't know about that. It can always get worse. This is the thing.
Yeah. I mean,
yeah. You can organize, yeah, but yeah, I know what you mean.
yeah, no, it's just my favorite part about organizing. Like, you do get hope, right? We do a lot of bitch sessions too, right? That terminology might not be great, but that's especially when we're grassroots NDP members. We seem to have a lot to complain about. But my favorite part is what we learn from each other, whether it literally be a skill set, for the resume, so to speak, or just different perspectives or approaches. And every time I go into spaces, especially, where I am to lead the space, so to speak, I even feel uncomfortable saying that. But I don't think the folks around, like I may be chairing the meeting or whatnot, but I don't think they realize I'm gleaning the most out of everybody else. Like it is just constant knowledge being soaked up by the people around you, often from people who think they have nothing to provide, right? The quietest people that join into some of the organizing circles often have the most to give knowledge wise. And so I loved, because I was going to ask you, do you think you can train leaders? Like, can everybody be a leader? But you answered that quite early on, that you do think everybody can be a leader. And I believe you. I think that's true. I think folks just need to, one, they need tools, quite like literal tools, but they need that encouragement. They need the solidarity that brings confidence and safe spaces so that they can be those brave people that we know that they are, right? Like not every space is safe to organize in. So what do
Yeah,
you
and I think
think?
I was just going to say, like, it totally reinforcing what you said. Like in our when we do the storytelling session, it is almost always, and it's almost a cliche at this point, like 90% of the time when we're in a small group and someone's like, I really don't have a story to tell. I don't know what I'm going to say. They always have like the most powerful, knockout, incredible story when they actually tell it, and it's just I don't know what to say. I don't have anything, and then they tell this like incredibly powerful, like well, almost like well crafted, but they're just talking authentically, and sharing something, and you're just like, that was so incredible. What are you talking about? Like, it's always those people who are just like, I don't have anything to say, but then they come out with this incredible story.
We are near the end of our discussion, so I always like to make sure that we leave viewers. We'd like to leave listeners with a call to action. So, short of, tell us, one, how do we get involved with ICL on different levels, but maybe on a more personal level, you can give folks um, a bit of call to action here.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for the opportunity. So you can find us online at changeleaders.ca, and we work with every group, and regardless, we have sliding scales. We do pro bono trainings too. We try not to turn anyone away for lack of funds. So anyone can. We love to work with anyone, really. If you have a campaign, you have a cause, a community facing a challenge, we'd love to work with you and partner with you. And I'm at Duncan at changeleaders.ca. Please reach out, send us an email. We'd love to collaborate. Um, and I was speaking on a personal level. I was speaking about AYA CAN before. We're adolescent young adult cancer advocacy. You can very relatively new, but ayacan.ca to get involved in that campaign. And for us at Institute for Change Leaders, we're on social media at I Change Leaders on Twitter and Facebook and Instagram too. Call to action: send me an email, send us a message. We'll get back to you. We'd love to collaborate. Love to work with you.
I'm sure, ideally, we have a lot of activists listening in. Um, and all of us, I know, are struggling to get what we need done because the world is still the way it is, right? So I encourage people to reach out to Duncan and to ICL and see what they have to offer. Like I said, I took a really transformative, very short period of time course. And yeah, I highly encourage you to check it out. Um, Thank you again, Duncan. I'm definitely going to take you up on some one-on-one conversations because like I said, I just find it very powerful to explore your own story as well as hearing others. And I am kind of one of those people that think I don't have much to offer. You'll notice I'm on a platform and I'm just giving it to other people. So maybe I have some work to do there in understanding what drives me a little bit. So I appreciate you kind of pushing us as a collective and me and putting me on the spot, so to speak.
I don't want to take. There's just one other thing that I was thinking about. And it kind of goes back to the sense of like we don't people aren't taught about organizing or these kind of practices when they're growing up, and I think I think about like a couple of years ago, I was in it was a museum of the civil rights movement, and it was, but it was a museum of organizing. When you look at it, and it was all about like, here's at step by step, like here's how they built their relationships, and community by community and church by church, and shared their stories, and built communal support, and came together to, and even like the Rosa Parks, like the Montgomery bus boycott, right? That was like, people talk about it like, oh, she just decided not to stand up, and not to give up her seat for a white man. But it was meticulously planned, right? Every bit of that was very intentional, thinking like, what's the strategy behind this? What are we going to do? Like, how is this going to go into align with our strategic goals and our approach and our capacities? And it was really, and this was, I was already kind of teaching and involved with the Institute by this point. And it was just wonderful to see, because I think we're taught all the time that the civil rights movement was Martin Luther King gave a speech in 1963 out in Washington, and and the president signed the Civil Rights Act. But like, and Martin Luther King, he was an organizer, right? Partly it's just the way history is taught. It's to reduce the collective, and reduce the experience of millions of people coming together to make a change. It's easier to talk about one person. It also, in a way, diminishes the millions of people who contributed to this, and that this didn't come because one person gave a speech. It came because millions of people came together and organized and took action, and they're going to have to do that again to win and to address a lot of the ongoing injustices that we all face. And so I think teaching that approach, and people learning that it wasn't just one person, it wasn't one leader
or one
it was
moment.
people it wasn't one moment. It was people coming together and over a long period of time and taking action together that really made a difference. And I think if we taught that, and if more people knew that, then people would feel more hope, that not waiting for someone to come along and fix it, but coming together with people in their community to do it themselves.
I appreciate you making sure to add that on, because that's a very valuable lesson. It is often reduced to something very reactionary, you know? Rosa Parks just couldn't take it anymore, and, and I imagine there was a lot of that involved, but that it does take a certain amount of work, but again, we know why we're not taught exactly how changes come about. But, that's not gonna stop us from teaching it, right? So
Thanks so much for having me, Jessica.
no, thanks for taking the time to come on, Duncan. I'm excited to provide, another set of tools for folks. And it's always interesting talking to you. So I appreciate it. Keep up the good work, Duncan. Like in all things that we do, there's a team behind Blueprints of Disruption. I want to give a big thank you to our producers, Santiago Hello Quintero and Jay Woodruff. Our show is also made possible by the support of our listeners. So if you appreciate our content and would like to become a patron, please visit us at www.patreon.com/BP of Disruption. So if you know of any work that should be amplified or want to provide feedback of our show, please reach out to us on Twitter at BP of Disruption. Blueprints of Disruption is a project of New Left Media, an independent employee-owned company.